everybody. Great to see everyone on this beautiful, bright, cold, I think, February day here. Today we have a special guest, Tina from the Toronto Master Gardening organization.
Tina has volunteered with the Toronto Master Gardeners since 2003. She writes and lectures on anything gardening. Her favorite plants are orchids, large trees, and anything that's exotic, and that brings a special gleam to her eye. Her latest adventures include rewilding 19th century Northern Ontario farm, and teaching a functional fitness class just for gardeners. So welcome, Tina, and please say hello, and we can get on with the show.
Excellent. Nice to see everybody, especially on a day like this. It's always nice presenting in the winter time because people actually will sit in front of their computers. Sometimes we give presentations in the summertime and people are out in their gardens. So it's certainly nice to see everybody. Okay, today we're going to talk about balcony and container gardening. And you do not have to remember anything that I tell you today because all of this information is on our website, the torontomastergardener.ca website. There are master gardeners sitting there 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, waiting to answer gardening questions for free. There's also plant lists and garden guides, that kind of thing on there too. So as I say, you don't have to remember anything I say, just enjoy the presentation. Okay, so a lot of people think that gardening on a balcony is really boring, but it really isn't. It's absolutely amazing what you can grow in containers and put on your balcony, and vegetables, trees, whatever you can manage. So let's discover how to garden on your patch in the sky. So let's talk about, first of all, the challenges and solutions to gardening above the ground. Why should we bother to garden in containers? What are the benefits? What should we look at before we buy any of the plants? And the pros and cons of different types of containers, how to prepare them, and a few of the plants that really suit being in a container. So why should we garden in containers? Sometimes it's the only option, right? If we're on a balcony or we have a porch that's raised or a terrace, containers are our only option. You can even use them though in the regular garden, because if you have a well-placed planter of flowers or foliage, it can brighten up a dull corner. You can use it to contain plants that are quite aggressive. We call them garden thugs. So your mints and things like that, you don't want them to take over your garden. You can put them in a container. And some of us who have Norway maples, which are great big trees that suck up all the nutrients and water from the soil, if you put a pot of coleus under there, it's a really nice way to brighten up something under a Norway maple. Containers are portable, most of them anyway, unless you've got a great big one with a tree in it. But let's suppose you were growing this zucchini here and you had sun in the morning, but in the front yard you had sun in the afternoon. The container's portable, so that might be a good way to make sure that your plants are getting enough sun that they need. Or if it was going to be a hurricane or one of those superstorms, you could then move the container somewhere where it's safe. We know that gardening in general is really good for you physically and psychologically, so that's a good thing. It's good to be outside and growing things that are healthy. It really helps you relax and unwind. It's also good for nature. So any garden, big or small, even one plant in a pot can provide food and a haven for our pollinators and birds. So because we live in a city that's mostly concrete, sidewalks and roads, things like that, and we have creatures, butterflies and birds and other pollinators that are flying from their summer place in Muskoka down to their summer place in the wintertime, like Mexico, there's this great big area of concrete where they have hard pressed to find water, food, and shelter. So even a pot on a balcony can provide the perfect little haven for our passing through pollinators. So the first thing you need to do is really think about it. I know it's so exciting just to go out and buy beautiful plants, but you really want to make sure that they're going to be successful in your space. So the first thing you need to do is, if you're in a building, make sure there are any rules that might restrict what you can do. They might not let you attach something to the building. They may not let you hang baskets or trellises. Are you allowed to put planters on the railing? Sometimes it can be dangerous if the door is underneath and you're on the 6th floor and the planter falls off, or the water that you water it with falls down on somebody. That can be a liability. Is the balcony strong enough to carry the weight of pots and plants? You have a great big 6-foot square container with a tree in it. You've got to know that your balcony is strong enough to hold it. The other thing too, can you get all of that stuff to your balcony? Can you get it up the elevator? Do you have to book a service elevator? Do they even let you do that kind of thing? So that's the first thing you need to know. Then you should decide, what do you want to do with the space? Do you want it to be a space for entertaining? Do you want to barbecue out there? Do you just want to relax and have your little solitary oasis, glass of wine at the end of the day? Do you need privacy out there? Maybe you're facing an apartment building and the guy in the apartment right across from you likes to, read his newspaper in the nude or something. So you don't want to see that. You might be deciding that you want your balcony to have some sort of privacy screening. Maybe also to create a more attractive view. Maybe there is a big, ugly apartment building right out your window. And if you grew some flowers, you'd see that instead of the apartment building. And maybe you want to grow your own food. Balconies are a great place, and containers are a great place to grow vegetables. The next thing you need to do in your planning is to assess your growing conditions. For any kind of gardening success, you need to know the growing conditions where you plan to place your plants. If you don't choose the right plant for the right spot, your efforts will not be successful. So you want to look at the gardening space in the morning, at lunchtime, late afternoon, and look for the availability of light, look and see how windy it gets, and other environmental issues or physical issues like big trees or shading apartment buildings or awnings over top. Maybe the balcony above you covers most of your sunlight. Of all of these things, the amount of light that your balcony gets is the key factor in what will grow well. Some plants need a lot of sun to grow, some will tolerate less. So get out your notebook, just note how much sun or shade does your balcony get and for how long. Is it morning, noon, or late afternoon? And note all of this down. So sunny conditions, that would be full sun for 6 to 8 hours. Part sun would be 4 to 5 hours. And then there's also a difference in the light intensity depending on morning, afternoon, or late afternoon. Morning sun is much cooler. It's kind of brighter. There's kind of a magic in the morning sun, but by late afternoon, it's quite a hot sun. And if you get late afternoon sun, you may want to choose plants that are not prone to wilting and that don't need a lot of water. But you don't necessarily have to be sun to have a successful container garden. There are lots of plants that will grow in the shade. And again, it's important to figure out what kind of shade you have. Generally, we say it's 4 hours of sun or less, but is it dappled shade? Do you get some pockets of sun in the morning? Do you get some in the afternoon? That's all the kind of thing that you want to make note of if you want to be successful. Wind and water, and this is a really big deal when it comes to balcony garden. Some balconies experience really strong winds, especially the higher you go. So you may need to get containers big enough that you can put some weight in the bottom of them so they don't blow over. You may have to provide some sort of windbreak, maybe curtains or something like that. You want to choose plants that are suitable for windy conditions. You don't want something with great big leaves that's going to blow in the wind. You want something with long, strappy kind of leaves, grasses, that kind of thing, that don't grow very tall because, again, that will catch the wind. Wind is really going to dry out your containers, especially if your plant plots are smaller. So you want to know about that. Are you going to be able to water all of these different times? Because it's quite windy and your pots are quite small. And in terms of water, can you get water to the balcony? Are you going to have to bring pots from your kitchen sink? Is that going to be a nuisance? Are you going to be able to maybe screw one of those little hoses on? That's something you should think about too. If you're planning to have trees or perennials, you also want to consider that you're going to have to overwinter them somewhere. So either a balcony big enough that you can push them all to the side where they're kind of protected, or actually take them maybe into the storage area of the apartment. And that is actually a real building in China with all those trees on the porches. Just beautiful. So we have to talk about plant hardiness zones. We all know that depending on where you live, certain plants will grow and certain plants will find it too cold. So especially important in balcony gardening, because if you want to winter over perennials and trees, you're going to want to choose plants that are at a lower hardiness than what would be recommended for Toronto. Okay, that will help them live longer in pots and last over the winter. So it's a little bit complicated because our Canadian hardiness zones are not the same as the United States hardiness zones. There's a lot of science that goes into why they're different. I don't really care. I'm sure you don't either. If you want to, I can tell you, but so using the Canadian system, Toronto's kind of a zone 7A. Using the United States system, Toronto's a zone 6. So you have to look at the plants you're buying to see if you could figure out if they're using US or Canadian hardiness zones, because they sell lots of plants in Canada, most of them actually with the US hardiness zones, and figure out if that plant's going to winter over, figure out if you want something that's a couple of zones lower so that you have a better chance of it surviving the winter. Actually, make a plan, okay? You don't have to do something fancy like this. I think this is on a computer program or whatever, but you can just take a piece of paper, sketch out your shapes and your space, and decide what you want where. Decide where the sun is, okay? This one we can see faces north, so it's not going to get a lot of sun on that side. You can make little notes on it. I get sun from 8 in the morning till noon, that kind of thing. You really want to know everything and put it all together in one plan, because you're going to take that with you when you go shopping. Let's talk.
Tena, excuse me.
Yes.
Forgive me. I should have said before. We have a couple that have joined us, and they live in Moose Jaw. Okay.
Wow.
So,
Welcome.
so their weather might be a little bit different than ours.
Their hardiness zone is much lower. I'm thinking maybe like they may know, but it may be like a 3. Thunder Bay, I think, is 3, and Moose Jaw's further north. And I know it's in Saskatchewan, but
yeah,
anyway,
it's south.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. So yes, indeed. You do
the other thing I was going to say about hardiness zones, I understand that the higher you go up in an apartment, it changes zones as well. Is that correct?
It changes zones if you want to winter over. So that's why we suggest going to hardiness zones lower than what would be recommended. So if you were going to buy, let's say, like a little yew tree that you wanted to keep. Now I know kind of off the top of my head that yew trees are hardy to zone 3. So that would be a perfect choice. If you're going to choose something that's borderline hardy, some of the fancier shrubs and things like that, or some of the, let's see, what would be a perennial? Maybe a perennial delphinium or something that wouldn't grow up north all winter and survive. then you would want something that's a lower hardiness zone. You can always grow them as annuals though. They'll always last for the summer. So, but yes, definitely, higher you go, the more the conditions.
If we did want to bring them inside, is there a procedure to do that?
We can talk about if it's a perennial plant, if it's a garden plant, it won't want to come inside for this winter. It like a boxwood or a yew or butterfly, whatever you're growing that would be in your garden, typically you cannot bring it inside. It needs that cold rest. If you've gone tropical though, like the mandevillas or a bougainvillea or something like that, then yes, indeed, you would bring it inside for the winter time. And you would want to make sure before you brought it in that you'd had a couple of weeks of blasting it with water to make sure it had no bugs. And you would want to expect that when you brought it in, it would really pout because plants like to be outside. And when you bring them in, I have never brought a hibiscus in that didn't get whitefly and lose all its leaves by January, February. But, you know, you kind of keep it alive till you can take it outside again and you're good to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So containers. Containers, I mean, the possibilities are endless. Size of containers determined by the space you have available and what you want to grow in it. Most plants can be grown in containers if you pick the right plant and if you give enough space for the roots and you care for them, like give them enough water. But generally, the bigger the container, the better. It allows for more root development and they don't dry out as fast. All different types of containers have their pros and cons. Bottom line for all of them, they all have to have drainage. They have to have a drainage hole. So let's just look at some of the different materials. Wood. Wood is porous, really easy to build something to suit what you need it for. It can be very heavy to move though. It does deteriorate over time, and sometimes it's a really good home for insects and diseases. So if you're also considering growing vegetables, you may not want to use wood that has been pressure treated because it does have chemicals in it and it could possibly leach into the soil. There's different views on that, but to be safe, use wood that hasn't been treated if you're going to grow vegetables. Clay and terracotta, very, very common, traditional. Sometimes you can get them glazed, like the blue one there. Those ones are not porous, but our regular red clay ones are porous, so that means they dry out a little bit faster. They can be expensive. They're heavy when they're full. I have a couple of blue ones like that, and my goodness, to move them I just kind of drag them across. And they can crack if you leave them outside through the winter. I have had some that survive the winter, but yeah, unless they're empty and protected from any kind of moisture that's in there that will cause it to expand. So you may need a place to store them over the winter. Stone or concrete, more expensive, and they do weigh a lot, so may not be okay for a balcony, but they are so pretty. So you may want to even get just a couple of little ones with a pot of herbs or something like that, because they definitely have a style about them, an elegance. Hypertufa is kind of fun. So it does look like something like a natural rock or something like that, and you can make it yourself. It's really just a combination of some concrete, cement, peat moss, and perlite. And they're quite lighter than real concrete. And they're really good for alpine plants. A lot of people that have like alpine or succulent gardens, they will build hypertufa containers. So pretty. I've actually built some myself, not hard to do. Metal containers, again, can be quite heavy. There's some modern looking ones. Galvanized buckets are getting popular, troughs. The only thing you may want to consider there is that metal containers do absorb heat. So if it's a really small metal container and you have a plant that does not like to have its roots warm, then that's not really a good choice. And again, make sure they have drainage holes in them. Plastic, fiberglass, polyresin, these are the most common. They're not that expensive. They're light, they're colorful, easy to clean. They're not porous so that they hold the water. You don't have to water them as often. Again, there is some concern about the microplastics if you're growing vegetables, but it's really minimal, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. You can actually splurge and buy self-watering containers. So they have little reservoirs in the bottom and the plant roots can suck the moisture up. You can get them almost at any of the garden centers. They're a little bit more expensive. The only warning I would give you is that if it doesn't have like an overflow plug in it, you don't want to leave it outside during heavy, heavy, heavy rains. I had a couple of really nice ones that I liked. I left them outside all year round. Midway through the summer, my plants all of a sudden died. And when I went to check on them, the soil was absolutely saturated, and all the roots had rotted. And that was because every time it rained, the reservoir would fill up and then it got bigger, 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 bigger till the whole thing was just water. So if you're going to leave them, if they don't have the drainage plug, good idea to leave them in a sheltered area. Don't forget too, you can put containers vertically. Okay, you can attach them to trellises. If they let you, you can attach them to the ceiling of the balcony above you. You can put them on lattice, all sorts of different ways. Again, if they let you put them over the railings, maybe they'll let you do it on this side, not on the side that could fall off and hit someone. Don't forget to think about that. And have some fun. Teapots, old shoes, old hats, fancy cloth bags, anything you want to use. That the chair has just got a pot in it. You can use anything that you want to use as long as it has drainage. It has to have drainage holes. So what do you do to the containers once you get them? First of all, you make sure they have drainage. You may have to drill a hole in the bottom. Why is drainage important? Every single plant on earth, the roots need to have oxygen. They need to have oxygen to do photosynthesis and to do all sorts of things, produce food, that kind of thing. If the soil is waterlogged, the oxygen can't get to the roots and the plant will die. It is a long-standing myth that to increase the drainage in your pots, you should put rocks or pot shards or styrofoam peanuts, something like that in the bottom to increase the drainage. That is a myth. It actually does the opposite of that. Soil is like a sponge. So think about if you had a sponge on a table and you poured water in it, all that water is going to stay in the sponge. It's not going to go onto the table. It holds the water unless it gets super saturated. And soil is exactly like that. So when you pour water into the soil, it acts like a sponge. As the water goes down and it hits a drainage layer, it stops. It stays up there where the soil is. So it sticks together. So it does not increase drainage. It does the opposite. What it really does is take up valuable root space. So I would much rather have the extra space for my roots to grow than to worry about filling it up with something that doesn't increase drainage. If you're worried about soil coming out the bottom, you can use a piece of screen or coffee filter for a little while just till the roots take hold. I never even do that anymore. I just put the soil in, and as I said, when I water it, it sticks together. If you are going to get some sort of shrub or tree or perennial, you do want to think about preparing the containers for overwintering. You can buy insulated pots. You can add styrofoam inside. You can add a wrap on the outside. I prefer not to add the styrofoam and the stuff to the inside because again, it does take up root space. I'm very happy to do the treatment on the outside come winter. Okay, I have a confession to make. I am a cheap gardener. I go to garden centers and grocery stores, any place like that that I can go and find plants. I go to the discount bin. I get the ones that are dying, and I'm very, very happy to do that. It's like a sport with me to see what I can get. I never, ever, ever, ever do that with soil. Soil is probably the second most important thing for growing, successfully growing plants. Besides light, you need to have a good, what we would call soilless mix. It's a little bit more expensive. It's made up usually of peat moss, perlite, and organic matter, maybe fertilizer, hopefully some fertilizer. Excuse me. Um, there is a little bit of controversy about using peat these days. There's another substance made out of coconut husks. It's called coir. It also has disadvantages in terms of ecology because it comes from a distance. There's processing costs there and using fresh water. So we're kind of in the middle of peat and coir and what else to use as an alternative, because peat takes a long time as a resource to renew. But when it comes to container gardening or houseplants, there isn't much of an alternative. So we do recommend a soilless mix that you would find. It's usually referred to as a potting mix or a container mix. Do check and see if it has fertilizer added to it. So it would have 3 numbers on it that would tell you that yes, indeed, fertilizer has been added to it. If it doesn't have the numbers, you will have to add fertilizer immediately, because peat moss and perlite have no nutrition whatsoever. So don't cheap out on soil. You can reuse it over and over again if you add compost to it every year. Okay, time for shopping, time to choose your plants. So we already talked about having a plan. We have to get over the 24th of May garden extravaganza, right? We all jump in our cars 24th of May, we go, we pick flowers, we put them in, it's so exciting, and we get home and we've chosen the wrong plants and we whatever. So take your garden plan with you. Go to a really big nursery. There's lots of nurseries that specialize in, or don't specialize. They have a wide variety of plants to choose from, not just the boring old stuff. Nowadays, they do tend to have sections like plants for shade, plants for sun. Be a little cautious about that. They're usually pretty accurate, depending again on the nursery. Do look at the plant tags. Okay, that's going to tell you the zone. It's going to tell you how big it's going to get. I think of, again, I'm going back to house plants, but at Christmas time, people buy Norfolk Island pines because they're so cute in little pots. And in nature, Norfolk Island pines get to be like 120 feet tall. So you don't want something on your balcony that's going to take over, a maple tree or something like that. Make sure you know the size. And again, double check the light conditions, and then just pick what you like. Right plant for right spot and you're good to go. And do splurge. I always buy one thing that I didn't plan for. Vegetables are an excellent thing to grow in containers. So look for varieties that say bush, like bush beans, or compact, or space savers, especially important for tomatoes, right? Tomatoes are either like a bush, determinate, or indeterminate vines. So if you're going to pick one that's indeterminate, make sure you've got the trellis space for it. Do think about trellises or poles, your peas and everything like that. Some of your zucchinis and squash can grow up, so they're not taking up room on the floor of your balcony. Most of your vegetables, I have to say though, probably 86.4% need full sun. Okay, so if you don't have full sun, alas, you are not going to be able to grow tomatoes. There are some leafy things like your kale, your lettuce, that kind of thing that will tolerate a little bit of shade. Always worth a try. And I mean, you can get tomato plants for, again, if you're cheap at the end of the season for $1.99. And if you think you have maybe 5 hours of sun, try it. It's only $1.99 and it's only one season. Just don't be disappointed if it doesn't work. But again, if you go to the Toronto Master Gardener website, there is information on growing particular vegetables, which ones like shade, which ones like sun. Herbs. Again, there are some herbs that absolutely need sun, most of them, in fact, thyme, sage, rosemary, some that will tolerate a little bit of shade. So the basil, parsley, chives, mint, lots of different varieties this year that you can get. Again, some of them are perennial. If you had a clump of chives, they will last over to the next season. Basil, not at all. Some of them you can try and bring in. They don't like it. If anybody's ever brought a rosemary plant in and managed to overwinter it, good for you. I've never been able to do that. They don't like it. You can actually grow fruit. I'm sure you've seen the hanging baskets of strawberries. You can do that. There are columnar apple trees, so they grow really thin and tall. You can try that, although you'd need a couple of them or some sort of apple tree close by for pollination. Raspberries, currants, half-cap berries are the latest ones. They love to grow up north. They would love it in Moose Jaw. Saskatoon berries. Blueberries are a really good choice because blueberries like acidic soil, which is really hard to find in some places like Toronto, but you can use an acidic soil in a pot. Very easy to grow. Flowers. Again, the possibilities are endless. So let's just look at a few annuals. Annuals will live only the one season. Their native habitats are in tropical locales, but they will flower all season. They're very colorful. We know that many of our vegetables are annuals. We know that you'll have to buy them every year, but they are really easy to start from seed. So if you got marigold seeds or zinnia seeds and put them into your outside containers even in May, okay, you're still going to get flowers by mid-season. So that's kind of a nice thing to do. Some of the vegetables too, your peas, they wouldn't mind being out in the cooler weather. You can start from seed right in your container and still have something successful. There's lots of annuals for shade. A lot of them are foliage, our coleus, our alocasia, our caladium. Very, very colorful though. Very, very kind of a sophisticated, elegant container. Impatiens again, fuchsia. All of those things will tolerate. Oh, the begonias. There's so many beautiful begonias with those great big flowers now. Well worth getting. And again, for sun, the salvias, cosmos, there's our zinnias down in the bottom corner, and marigolds. Nicotiana, so that's the white one that looked kind of trumpety in the top corner. Nicotiana is actually a tobacco plant, but they're so scented at night because they try to attract pollinators, moths, which are out at night. Another consideration for your balcony garden is, do you want something that smells really, really pretty? And that's a good one for that, Nicotiana. Some vines, brown-eyed Susan vine, some of the cascading petunias, morning glories, passion flowers, all good choices. Perennials. So these are ones that are going to live hopefully longer than a couple of years. A large variety again. There's something you're going to have to winter over. Good idea to combine them with some annuals because perennials don't flower all year like annuals do. You may get perennials that flower for only a couple weeks at a time, and then you have just the foliage, which is fine too. It is also a really great opportunity to plant native. Native plants are, I hate to say trend, because trend sounds like something that's fashionable and then not fashionable, but we've really come to realize how important it is to support our bees, our butterflies, our beetles, all of these kinds of pollinators that need to have native plants. The annuals that come from different countries that are not native to Ontario is kind of like feeding these pollinators McDonald's. So they may like it, but it's not healthy for them and it doesn't sustain them and lead to good reproduction and all of that kind of thing. And people used to think native plants were ugly or messy. Look at these, they're not. That is a butterfly milkweed, the orange one, and it would be beautiful in a pot all by itself, and it does flower off and on most of the summer. Coreopsis, again, the yellow one, again, flowers more. Asters for the fall, which is really important because we've got things that are migrating. And Liatris, which is something, if you want something tall and thin and beautiful and pollinator friendly, that's a really great one. We even have them for the shade, wild blue phlox, ferns. We've got a lot of native ferns. Agastaki, which is the purple one in the middle, it smells like licorice. There's a white one and a purple one, and it also kind of flowers for a lot more than just a week or two. Beautiful, beautiful. A bit more robust. It's a bigger plant, but I love it. I love this. Even brushing by it, you get that licorice smell. Some of our goldenrods, the goldenrod kind of has a bad name because we think of how it just takes over, but there's lots of goldenrods that are well behaved in the garden. So this is a blue stem goldenrod, and it is actually, goldenrod in general, the #1 plant that pollinators need in the fall. Absolutely the #1 plant. If you have one goldenrod in your garden, you are doing amazing support for all of our native wildlife. Perennial climbers, so the clematis, you can grow clematis in pots. So that's our native clematis, the white one there. Your mandevilla, again, we mentioned that, that's a tropical one that you'd have to bring in. Roses, climbing roses, and then this is a trumpet honeysuckle, but please don't mistake it for most of the honeysuckles that you buy in the nursery. Most of those are invasive, and if it goes to seed and a bird eats the seed and puts it in distributes it, it can cause problems in the environment. So make sure that it's a trumpet or coral honeysuckle, not your regular honeysuckles. Succulents, so easy. If you have like a burning hot sunny balcony or porch or anywhere in the backyard, a shallow pot of succulents will last you all summer. Very easy. They don't need water. I had some of those ones in the top corner, hen and chicks, in my garden. I pulled them out because I didn't want them in one spot. I just kind of left them at the side of the garden all summer. Didn't water them, didn't put them in soil. They were fine. Some of them even wintered over. They just sat where they were. So an amazing thing to grow. Some of them are hardy, some of them are houseplants. So they're very happy outside all day in the summertime, but some of them you'll have to bring in the winter. So this one that's here, right there, that's probably a Haworthia that wants to come in. These are probably okay outside. I think that's another one that wants to come in. So again, it should tell you on the tag, the hardiness zone, and if it's anything higher than 7, you'll want to bring it in. Water gardens. A container is a perfect place to have a water garden. This is the one exception where you do not want drainage, obviously. A lot of the fancy nurseries and stuff will sell water plants. So easy to get a little pump. You just put it in the bottom, you plug it in. You can put it on a timer if you want, if you don't want it running all the time, and you're good to go. Absolutely beautiful. So you can plant shrubs and small trees. Okay, I would not personally plant a pine tree, which is the beautiful fuzzy one in the back, because they do get quite big. But there are other things that you can plant that are shrub-like or tree-like. We talked about apple trees. Lots of shrubs. If you wanted to have hydrangea, if it wasn't too hot and sunny and you were going to water a lot, you could do hydrangea. A lot of our native plants you could do, some of the little round cedars that don't get so big. We talked about yew, service berries. Probably the most common one is boxwood, and they're pretty cheap. You can get them for like $10 at Home Depot, but I would not recommend getting a boxwood. Boxwoods now have at least 10 different things that will kill them. Doesn't kill them in 1 year, it just makes them look absolutely ugly and miserable for about 3 seasons. There's moths and leaf miners and 2 kinds of new fungi that attack them. So don't buy the boxwood unless you just want to buy it and throw it away when it gets the bugs. Now, it's a commitment to have a tree or a shrub in a pot because it's not meant to grow in a tree or pot. It's meant to spread its roots out into the soil. So every couple of years, approximately, your tree or shrub is going to get root bound. So the roots are going to grow to the side of the container and they're going to start to grow around and around and around in a circle. Okay, what's the big deal about that? Well, as you can see, the roots get so dense that they actually form a wall that is impenetrable by water. So you may think that you're watering that tree, you pour your pot of water on it, you see the water go, you think it's sinking in, but it's not. It's actually going down between that root wall and the side of the pot. So that tree is not getting any water whatsoever. So to prevent this, if you want to grow a tree in a container, every couple of years or so, you're going to have to take that tree or shrub out. You're going to have to prune the roots. So you're going to pull the roots apart, or you're going to take a sharp knife and slice them so that the roots have about 2 inches of clean soil to grow out into. The more clean soil you can give them, the better it is. You can put it in a bigger container if you want, but even if you do that, you have to make sure that those roots have been sliced so that they're growing outwards, because otherwise it just stays like that. And you may, when you drive around the neighborhood, you may have seen somebody that's just planted one of those cedar hedges and the one in the middle is orange. Well, that's because they bought it when it was pot bound like that, just plunked it in without massaging the roots, and the tree is not getting any water. So make sure if you're going to have shrubs or small trees that you do this root pruning at least every couple of years. And don't be, so we talked about, annuals, perennials, trees, and shrubs. Mix them up. You can put them, you don't have to have, you can have tomatoes with marigolds. Lots of people think the tomatoes grow better because the marigolds repel the bugs and the insects and stuff that love to eat your tomatoes. So go for combinations, color combinations, different types of plants. Go for it. When it comes to design, there's a little phrase. We often think of the phrase thriller, filler, and spiller. So a thriller is the big, tall, spectacular, in-your-face, gorgeous plant. Those big elephant ears, the fun grass, maybe a standard gardenia or something like that. Fillers fill in the rest of it. Okay, they set off the other ones. And then spillers go over the side and kind of soften the edge of the container. You can also have, I don't want to say year-round, but you could also consider this fall coming up, planting bulbs. You can put tulips in, you can put grape hyacinths, hyacinths, daffodils, whatever you want. Daffodils are better because the squirrels don't like to eat them. Plant them a little bit deeper. They will come up in the spring, and then as they start to die back, you can fill that pot with annuals. Okay, so we've got our container planted. What are we going to do to look after it? Watering. So besides the most important thing being light, your plant getting enough light, watering is second. So you want to check your pots frequently. How do you do that? You can get a moisturizer meter if you want, but you can take your finger, stick it in as far as you can go. You want to, if it feels like it needs water, you want to water it enough that the water goes all the way down and out the drainage holes. Okay, you want those roots to go down deep into the pot. If there's no moisture down there, the roots are not going to grow all the way down there. Okay, and again, drainage, we don't want the wet feet. Put some mulch over the top. That will help with keeping it moist, the soil moist, so you don't have to water it as often. But truth be told, if you've got like a tomato plant on a south-facing balcony, you might have to water that 2-3 times a day. just depending on how root bound it's got and how hot and sunny it is, how big the plant is, how big the pot is. But do check it. You can have, there are some tricks. Some people take plastic bottles. You can buy a fancy bottom for them, or you can just take the lid off, stick it in, cut the top off, pour some water in, and then you end up with like a reservoir of water. Fertilizers. So as I mentioned about the soilless mixes, your container mixes, do check to see, first of all, if they already have fertilizer in it. And read the package. It'll tell you how often you need to renew the fertilizer. Some of the nutrients will leach out, so you may want to give it a little bit, extra. No, strike that. You never give more fertilizer. Less is better. But you do need to have fertilizer for container plants because the food in the container gets eaten by the plant, just like us with our refrigerators. We have to keep them full, but don't over fertilizing them because it can burn the roots and kill the plant. Fertilizers come in many, many forms. You can get it to add to water. You can get these grains. I wouldn't use the spikes. They're not so successful. You can get powder forms that you add to water. Get something that's kind of a general fertilizer so that like it's maybe the numbers, all three numbers are pretty close, like 312, 321, something like that. Don't be fooled by all the different marketing. You don't need a special fertilizer for tomatoes. You don't need a special fertilizer for orchids or tropical plants. All you need is one good general fertilizer. If you want to get really fancy, you can make your own compost. There's ways to do it with a bucket inside another bucket. You can pour your food scraps out there. You can also try vermicomposting. You can get a container, put some air holes in it, get a few worms, and the worm castings will be really good fertilizer. Okay, so when you've got your containers, if it's a flowering container and the flowers die off, you can just pinch them off, okay? Because you don't want the energy from the plant going to making seed. You want it to go to making more flowers. So pinch off the dead ones. Sometimes, if you have those petunias, they get long and scraggly, no leaves up there. You can cut them back a little bit, prune them, and make them a little bushier. By the middle of the summer, your containers, especially if they're annuals, are going to get that root bound problem. Okay, they're going to have the roots out at the side, may or may not have formed that wall. I'm thinking of Boston ferns. We all get the Boston ferns for our front porches. Those are root bound in no time at all, and they will die if they don't get the water on the inside of the roots. So kind of check it out. You can kind of lift the plants a little bit from the bottom if you're very gentle and see if the whole thing comes out. But really, come mid-season, I would poke some holes in it. So aerate the top of it to make sure that the water is getting to the inside of the soil, not just running out the bottom. If it was a plant that you were going to keep in the winter, you might consider repotting it. But if it's just a pot of annuals or whatever, just leave it. Don't worry about it because it probably will last till September till you want to get your chrysanthemums anyway. Also keep an eye out for insects and pests. If it's a pot that's just out there for the summer, I wouldn't worry about it too much. They won't do that much damage in a season. If it's a tree or a shrub or a perennial and the pest is a little bit more serious, then you might want to consider treating. We don't usually treat with pesticides anymore. Some of them are not available. The best way to get rid of things like aphids and mealybug and scale is to blast it with water. Again, if you're going to overwinter, best thing to do is to push all of the containers together if you can, and then put some sort of barrier around them. If your containers are on your back porch and you can put them in your garden and cover them with leaves, that's a good thing. If the container's small enough, you can sink it in the ground. That's another way to protect it over the winter. Don't wrap them with burlap. What you want to do if you're going to use burlap is to create kind of a tent or a shelter that protects them from the wind. The wind is the worst thing in the wintertime and the hot sun because it pulls all the moisture out of the leaves or the needles. So that will protect it a little bit, the burlap. I personally never do any kind of protection because if it can't survive, I don't want it because I don't have time to look after it. But if it's something you cherish, then it might be worth protecting. Yeah, what else was I going to say? Oh yeah, make sure that you're watering right up until frost because a hydrated plant will be much better in the cold freezing than if it has just dry soil. Okay, there we go. We figured out what we want from our balcony gardens. We figured out the space. We figured out the growing conditions, the container. We've made a plan. We've gone shopping for plants. And we are ready to enjoy a summer of gin and tonic cocktails, looking at our beautiful flowers, picking a tomato for a toasted tomato sandwich. Heaven. So I'm quite happy to answer any questions if you have any. I will stop sharing and join the crowd. And I'm happy to answer questions on other things too, house plants or trees and shrubs or starting from seed, which is a good thing that's coming up soon. Happy to answer any of them.
Go ahead.
I've got one for you. I was blown away by the picture of the zucchini plant. Oh my goodness, I've never seen so many zucchinis on that plant, and it was a potted plant.
Yes.
They
Have
like,
you ever grown zucchinis before?
well, yes, I love growing with zucchinis, and even in the garden, we never got that many that were as there were on that plant. You know, so what am I doing wrong?
So good quality soil,
Right.
start with. And are you growing them vertically or just letting them?
Just the zucchini, just letting them.
Not
Yeah.
that it doesn't make that much of a difference. You can
Right.
grow it the way you like it.
Right.
It you want to attract pollinators to your garden, right? Because you want the bees going into the flowers. Are you getting lots of flowers?
Yes. Yes. I'm
Okay.
getting flowers,
Yeah.
but not. My neighbor was doing some cross pollinating self, because I'm not sure if we're getting the insects or the bees. Last summer we were better with the bees, but
Yeah.
you know,
So I always have something to attract pollinators to my garden. So you want a water source. Okay, it
okay.
can be a bird bath or a shallow pot with rocks and water on it.
Mhm.
And then something colorful and full of nectar as well, right? So if you had a pot of flowers beside it that maybe would attract them,
Mhm.
native plants are really good. Don't ever use pesticides of any kind. You don't need sprays and things like that. Um, it may benefit from depending on again what you've planted it in, it may benefit from a dose of compost or fertilizer midway through the summer, and then hot sun.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Thank you. What
And
about eggshells? Um,
that's a myth.
is it okay?
It is a myth. All of those home recipes that you hear about, spraying with this and spraying with milk and all of that kind of thing, they've not, there's a reason they've not been tested, right? We want something that if we're going to use something, it's going to work. So all of those things are myth. Coffee grounds, all of that kind of thing. Good in compost if you're making a compost, but in terms of just adding them to, Epsom salt, to tomatoes and things like that, no, it's all a bunch of baloney.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Janet, go ahead.
Go ahead, Janet.
Oh, okay. A couple things, if I can remember them now. What I found with the tomatoes, I'm on a balcony. I face southwest, and so the sun moves fairly fast, but I get it up until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But the plants kind of have to move along with the sun. When I first moved in here, I tried the big tomatoes, but what I found is the cherry tomatoes or the Roma tomatoes, and I'll get more of them and they'll ripen up faster because they're smaller tomatoes. So they ripen up faster than like a beefsteak.
Yeah, for sure. And there's certainly more flowers and things like that too on the cherry tomatoes.
Yes.
But you've had to get a trellis, I bet, for them, or some sort of tall pole, right? Because
Mhm.
they're indeterminate, so they'll grow forever,
Yeah.
which is nice.
Mhm.
There's a really nice one that's it's a, I guess what you'd call it a cherry tomato, but it's yellow and pear-shaped, and it's quite lovely and produces a lot of fruit. I don't remember the name of it though.
Mhm. Okay.
The Toronto Botanical Garden in May, usually around Mother's Day, have a plant sale. Long way to come from Moose Jaw, but if you're in the Toronto area, it's a great place to go because they have a lot of the unique heirloom tomatoes and the little, all the kind of different stuff, and a lot of stuff for containers as well. So it's worth the trip and it usually
Mhm.
goes the whole weekend, Friday till Sunday.
Okay. Thank you.
If I may, a little bit off topic. Whereabouts is your property up north, and what are the challenges that you're finding with that?
So it's in Sprucedale, which is
Okay.
halfway
Spruce
between
Hill.
Huntsville and Perry Sound.
Okay.
And the people that owned it before, they were from Toronto as well. But they abused the land pretty much. So every kind of invasive plant that you can think of is up there. And I have a swath of Japanese knotweed, and I don't know if you've heard about Japanese knotweed. It's the #1 worst plant in the world. If you have Japanese knotweed in Great Britain, if you have a house in UK, you can't sell that house if it's got Japanese knotweed in it. It will come up through cracks, through concrete. The rhizomes go 2 meters deep into the soil, and it grows to be about, I don't know, 4 to 6 feet tall. Nothing grows under it. It does not stop erosion. It's just terrible, and it grows very fast. If you drive around, you'll see patches of it. It's got great big heart-shaped leaves. Um, I have that along one of my ponds. I will be dead before I ever even make a dent in getting rid of it. It's impossible to get rid of. I have goutweed, I have ajuga, I have lily of the valley, all of these things that are stopping the native plants from growing to restore the land to what it should be to support habitat. That's my biggest challenge. And then too, when we bought the property, I thought it would be, I would turn it into like Bouchard Gardens, and I'd wander along the paths and there'd be flowers and little deers eating things and stuff like that. No, Mother Nature is a force to be reckoned with, and things I've planted up there have not lasted the winter. The deer eat it to the ground, the beavers chew it off. So I have a new respect for what should be growing there, and that I'm just this, and the land is this. So I've changed my views. But it is like it's my place to go to. Every time I go up there, I think someday I'll say, I'm not coming back. You can keep Toronto.
Sounds lovely.
It does. Yeah.
Well, it sounds lovely, but the house is pretty much from like the turn of the century, just clapboard. We haven't done, like, the first year we moved in, the floors sank like this. You could go down in the basement, which was soil, dirt, and you could make snowballs out of the beams from the sawdust. It was just so rotten.
Oh my God.
Last winter, we were sitting there in the room with, insulation and vapor lock attached to it. And a white ermine ran down the wall and spent the winter with us. Yeah, it was good because he's a weasel, right? They turn white in the wintertime. Ate all the mice, which was great. Without the red squirrel that usually lives there. Usually I have a red squirrel that has babies there every year. And so I'll come into the dining room and she'll be sitting on there telling me off. And cats, she loves the cats. So it is an adventure.
Thank you for sharing that.
It sounds like you need a reality show of your own right up there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, maybe. I'm also not fond of snakes. I'm glad they're in the garden. We need them, but Yeah, I come to every time I go out in the garden, I check where they are and I say, okay, Sammy and Susie, you're there. Let me garden here. So yes, it's been quite an experience.
Is there anything to do with increasing the soil's nutritional value by using worms? Like, is there a way to increase the number of worms there, or go out and buy them from a place, or is that of any value?
So are you talking about garden or container?
Well, I guess either way. I mean, yeah, that's a good question.
Both.
So worms are actually kind of controversial these days. Because in the gardens, in the land, we don't have a native worm.
Right.
All of the worms have come from someplace else. And in our forests, the bush, these worms are voraciously eating all of the detritus that would be on top. So our trees lose the leaves. The worms are eating it too fast and degrading the topsoil and the nutrition so that the trees who are not used to that are not doing well. So they're devastating our forests, for one thing. The second thing is just 2 years ago, and this is another sad story. You'll have to stop me from telling it, but I was at a lecture and somebody asked the lecturer, what do you think about jumping worms? And he's like, I've never heard of jumping worms before. And she described them. They had not been found in Ontario before. And I almost fainted because I knew I had jumping worms in my greenhouse and I knew I had been throwing them outside. And I thought, I am going to be typhoid Mary for jumping worms. I'm going to get kicked out of, Master Gardener group because these jumping worms are also devastating our forests. They eat very fast and they get rid of stuff very fast. And things are just moving away. They're quite big worms. They squirm like snakes. And there's no way to get rid of them. So anyway, now that we're aware of them, we are very cautious about worms anywhere out in the garden. We're cautious about getting soil from disreputable people or people that don't know about jumping worms, because that's how it spread. It came in from, they're Asian jumping worms. They've come in somewhere from on a boat somewhere and just they reproduce so fast. They lay thousands of eggs every summer. So I would not add worms to a garden. You can do vermicomposting, which is, just on a Rubbermaid container and you throw in your apple cores and things like that. But again, I would want to make sure that I got red wiggler worms for sure, that they weren't jumping worms, because I think maybe that's how I might have got the jumping worms, was that I did do vermicomposting for a while. If you have outside gardens, please do check them, because as I said, we're finding more and more of these jumping worms in Ontario, which is very sad. We have to stop them from moving north. You can tell because the soil is quite loose and nothing grows in it. So that's a good thing. So sorry, long answer. I probably would not add worms to anything unless I was going to specifically do vermicomposting, which is a contained thing.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I also we have a lot of worms in our soil, but they're more like we just call them the earthworms. But they make the soil clumpy and more like clay-like and gluey, and so often it's not good either.
There's no doubt that worms in our vegetable gardens do a healthy thing, right?
Okay.
They do, because the worm castings are nutritious and they do process the decomposing
Mhm.
materials. I don't know too if you've heard that now it's hopefully someday soon going to be common practice that if we have a tree in the backyard, the leaves fall on, we leave the leaves. We leave them on the grass, we leave them in the gardens, we leave them where they are, because again, it protects habitat. The worms are very efficient, even throughout the winter, of going up and getting the leaves and pulling them down and, turning them into good viable soil. So it's just something that we have to be aware of and quite cautious about.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we won't get rid of them. I mean, even the jumping worms, it's going to be very difficult to get them rid of. All we can do is know about them and not let them move north. If you ever want to be like kind of creeped out, if you just type on YouTube jumping worms, and you can see, you could,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it was quite traumatizing for me to find them. The gentleman so when I've confessed to all the other gardeners that I was pretty sure I had jumping worms, they sent someone from University of Toronto to identify them. He was very excited because he'd never seen one before in real life. He'd just heard about them. I was not excited. Anyway.
Oh, it's been fascinating. Did you have? Okay. Any other questions?
One question.
Paul has a question.
Yeah, this is not a guarantee. This is a come down from jumping worms. I guarantee you. Okay. Well, then end this on a positive note. Okay. This cannot end on jumping worms. Okay.
Thank
All right. Question on a specific plant for growing in a vegetable garden. Radicchio. I know it's really people have tried it. My father was a natural this kind of thing, but do you need a lot of space to grow Italian lettuce?
No, I don't think so. And you wouldn't even need
No?
full sun. Now, are you talking about the Italian that gets the big ones, the big leaves and everything, or just the
Yeah, the
radicchio?
red ones. Yeah, the red ones. Yeah, they become a little red and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they'd be perfect for a container.
And then you can transfer it to a garden, right?
So I'm not 100% sure, but from the vegetable gardening that I do, any kind of leafy thing, lettuce, radicchio, not arugula, that kind of thing, I would grow right from seed. I wouldn't start it early. I wouldn't transplant it. I would put it right in the garden or right in the container and leave it there. Yeah.
So if you're gonna start at one place, leave it there, right?
Yeah, you probably can find it already started in whatever, but every time you transplant something, it has to get used to being there again. And most
Mhm.
leafy vegetables you can plant earlier than others, right? You'd never plant your tomatoes at the beginning of May unless it was like a heat wave and it was going to continue for the whole summer. You would wait. Sometimes my father, who lives in Aurelia, an hour and a half north, he usually doesn't plant his tomatoes till June because it does not like cold weather and it will pout. But cool things like your kale and whatever, you can plant those sometimes end of April, right in the garden from seed. Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
specifically, I'm let's say 85% sure that's the same with radicchio, but if you want to go on the Toronto Master Gardener website, they'll tell you exactly
So which
specific.
website is that again?
So torontomastergardeners.ca.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
we've got lots of information there. And if you can't find the information on it, someone will answer your question for free. And we're certified. We've done schools and things like that. So you're getting the right answer, not the advertising scam stuff you get.
Oh yeah, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. That is a good way to end.
Yeah, you
Delicious.
can't end on worms, okay? You gotta end. It's just too sad, all right? I mean,
Well, thank you
so
so much, Tina. This is really, really wonderful. And thank you to the Toronto Master Gardeners for putting this together. Um, thank you, everybody, for coming by. We'll let Tina go at this point, and then we can continue on. But thank you again so
Thank
much.
you. Good luck.
You're
Happy
wonderful.
garden season.
thank you,
Thank
Tina.
you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.